everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. I'm going to keep this intro short. Somehow I got food poisoning from, a Greek yogurt? A strawberry Greek yogurt from Trader Joe's and granola bar? I don't know what happened, but you don't need to know this part. But I'm just letting you know that's where I am right now. That's what I'm feeling. This is a great episode. This is Dan Erickson. If you don't know who Dan is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Olympia, Washington, Dan earned a master's in dramatic writing from NYU's Tisch School before moving to Los Angeles, where he worked a number of day jobs and some journeyman writing jobs for places like Super Deluxe and things like Spike's Lip Sync Battle pre-show. I think I had a friend that worked at Super Deluxe. I think they said that it was not a great place to work. Like, the new Super Deluxe was run by one of those private equity guys who thought that they knew how to write comedy. So I hope Dan's experience there wasn't bad. Anyway, in 2016, his hour-long pilot Severance became the first TV script ever included on the Blood List, an industry list of the best unproduced scripts. This led to a meeting with Ben Stiller's production company and eventually the show Severance, which is easily one of the best of the last decade. Its first season on Apple TV Plus is just wrapping up. In fact, if you are downloading this episode the day it comes out, this is the day of the finale. And it's already been renewed for a second season. It's a great show. I don't know what else to say besides that much. You know, it's great as a piece of genre fiction, sci-fi. You know, I think it's the best sci-fi show since Counterpart was on. Sadly, only a couple seasons on Starz. It's just a great drama, period. Wonderful acting from everyone involved. Wonderful writing, directing. So I hope you like this episode. Dan's a really nice guy. This was in the middle of a press day for him, which is weird for me. Usually I don't end up doing that kind of stuff. But, you know, when someone's doing a press day, you know, they're just answering a lot of, like, the same questions over and over. We actually kind of talk about this at the very beginning of the episode. And then it's maybe jarring, maybe not, to have to switch gears and be like, hey, let's get real existential. But I think we did it. Anyway, if this is your first episode of Beginnings, thank you for checking out the show. If you like what you hear, why not check out other episodes? What I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like. If you like this episode, Dan's a TV writer. What about my episodes with other TV writers, such as Damon Lindelof, Jim Gavin, the creator of Lodge 49, Jane Espenson, Stephen Conrad, the creator of Patriot, Ron D. Moore, Allison Tatlock of Better Call Saul and many other great shows, Amy Aniobi, Cord Jefferson, Jessica Gao, Yasser Lester, and tons of other people, actors, writers, musicians, artists, people from all different creative walks of life. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that wherever you get your podcast from. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. A lot of great episodes coming up. Two great comic writers, Kelly Thompson and Ryan North. Wonderful indie rock musicians like Frog Eyes and Front Person, Andrew Farmer, one of my favorite front-facing comedians of comedy, and also just a super great dude and wonderful writer. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears peeled for those episodes. But for now, let's talk to Dan. Well, here's the thing. This is what I was thinking of when I was getting ready to talk to you, is that you're in the middle of doing a bunch of interviews today, right?
Yeah.
So where does this fall in? Like, how many have you done already, and how many do you have after this?
This is This is interview 3 of 4, I think. And the one I did right before this was really weird because it turned out she's a good friend of my brother. And I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know I was going to be talking to, like, a family friend. So that was fun, but also a little daunting because, like, I don't want to embarrass him.
What? Wait, she didn't spring this on you. It was just like a happy coincidence?
It was a happy coincidence. Well, although he had texted me a few weeks ago. He was like, hey, I think you're going to talk to my friend at some point. But I didn't know it was today.
Cause I know that like when my wife and I we're usually the ones interviewed together, but like when we're doing like by interview 2, we're like spent. Or unless, and this is what I'm curious about. This is what I was thinking of. I'm like, have you codified your answers already into a like crystal thing that you can kind of like spit out? Or like, how are you interacting with your answers? How are you interacting? What is I guess this is the thing I was thinking of. What is the relationship between you, the person, and this kind of like, this being that is
the conception that is Dan Erickson.
Yeah. Have you thought about it as you're doing these interviews? Because it is, I think that I like kind of turn off after a while personally.
Yeah, no, well, it is funny. And this is something that has already happened today, which is like the second interview I was in, I referenced something and then I was like, crap, was that from the first interview? Like, did I just reference something? They have no idea. And so then I like went in and I sort of explained it, but I still don't know. I may have explained it twice or, I don't know. But yeah, you do start to, it's funny because you start to get these kind of canned answers or, you know, sometimes you'll tell a story and you'll be like, okay, I've told this story so many times now. Like I have to like try to fake it coming organically and, you know, I'll laugh at a certain moment of the story as though it just came to me. You catch yourself turning into a monster who does things like that. The more of these interviews you do.
Yeah. That's why, I mean, I come from like an improv background, like at UCB, both, by the way, and you saying like you called back to things that happened in other interviews. I have done that in like improv shows where I've called back to other shows. Like if I had 2 shows in a night or 3 shows.
That was from the 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
That was from yeah.
But I like that. What I liked about improv, and I still do it every once in a while, but like, is that like, I try not to calcify things. Although when I'm talking about myself, especially having done this show for so long, it's tough not to have like these calcified bits that I just kind of like spit out when I need them to, when they make sense to spit out, if that makes sense.
Right. And especially it's horrible when you start to see, when you see the same person doing multiple interviews and they do that, you start to be like, you disingenuous piece of garbage.
Well, it's not. It's like when I first moved to New York and I saw John Mulaney do stand up like maybe not 3 nights in a row, but like 3 nights over like a week and a half or 2 weeks. And it was the same set. Obviously he was like changing. He was like working on jokes. This is like 2008, 2009. And so I would see like little subtle changes, but like, it's not disingenuous, especially if I guess you're getting the same kinds of questions. I don't know how you find a new angle in. I'm not sure. Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to start finding a John Mulaney bit that's appropriate for any question and then just play it as, you know, as a stock bit.
Have you been to rehab? I mean, there's a thing right there for you. All right. Well,
yeah, not yet. But,
get started.
But no, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the town for it.
But okay. So this is the thing. I tried to find information about you online. There's not a lot. Olympia. Were you born there or were you just raised there or?
Both. I'm a born and raised Olympia boy. And yeah, was born there in St. Peter's Hospital in 1984, January 26th.
Okay. So, part of the indie rock scene there, K Records. What is your relationship with the Olympia music scene, which is mostly what I know about Olympia?
It's so funny because growing up, I thought Olympia was the lamest city on earth. I had no sense whatsoever of, you know, any contemporary music. I was very much like, I liked listening to like my parents' oldies station. So yeah, any of the like, you know, punk rock, Riot Girl stuff that was going on in Olympia at the time, in my defense, I was a child, and then subsequently a teenager, but I was completely unaware. And I remember there was, I want to say it was like 1998 or something. And I shouldn't say this publicly because I may be wrong, but, I think we were voted hippest city in the world by, I want to say it was Time Magazine. It was like Olympia is like what London was in the 60s or something. And I remember all of us just like, we thought it was so funny because we were like, have you lived here? Like, but then, yeah, now I look back and like, I go back there now and I go to these bars that, you know, historically it's like, yeah, Nirvana played here or whoever else, you know, Slater Kinney got their start here and you're like, wow, it was cool. Maybe I was the uncool party.
Well, did you feel that when you were younger, that you were the uncool party? Your words, not mine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did. I mean, I have a particularly embarrassing moment I can remember, which is my friend Neil Buzzo asked me to name, this was in like 1999, I think. And he was like, hey, name a song from the 90s. Just name any song from this decade. And I had a really hard time doing it. And I ultimately came up with My Heart Will Go On, by Celine Dion, like that. And he was like, no, that's worse than if you could have come up with nothing. So yeah, no, I wasn't a hip young man.
Well, then what were you doing in high school? Like what were your interests? What were you, anything, I guess?
I was a theater kid. And I come at this by way of the improv world too, a little bit. I did like UCB classes and had like we would perform at the clubhouse here, in LA, like this little group that I was in. But prior to that, yeah, I was a theater kid. So I would do the school plays and then like, you know, my parents bought me a camcorder at some point. And I started getting really into like stop motion. Like I had a bunch of original release Star Wars figurines, like that my brother had like unwisely gifted me, not knowing that they were like worth money. But you know, I didn't care about that. And I would just go and like I made like 4 Star Wars sequels before the prequels even came out. So I spent a lot of time like out in my yard, you know, blowing up Han Solo in various ways.
So, okay. Were your parents from Washington? Were they from Olympia or did they move there?
They moved there. My mom grew up in Bellevue, which is sort of a suburb of Seattle. Although it's kind of become its own place now. And then my dad was originally a farm boy from Minnesota and his family moved out to Oregon when he was like 12, I want to say. And so, yeah, he grew up in Minnesota and then Oregon and then moved to Washington later on.
What prompted them to move to Oregon? I'm trying to think. We're about the same age. So that would have probably been in like the 60s at some point that they moved, right?
Yeah. 50s or 60s. Late 50s, early 60s. I think it was just, they were on a farm. My grandpa, who passed away before I was born, I think was just having trouble making ends meet on the farm. And it was just a sort of way of starting a new life, new job, all that stuff.
Because I was thinking, I was like, sorry, in my head, I'm like, well, why would you move away from a Midwestern farm if it wasn't the Depression? In my head, I was like, obviously, the only time you would ever move away from a Midwestern farm is, 1933.
I think people have been moving away from farms for generations.
Some might say millennia that people have moved away from farms into different areas.
This is the first person to ever move away from a farm.
It's so baffling, your history, moving away from this farm. Do you know what they grew?
Not really. I know that they had animals. I know they had like milk cows and chickens, I believe. I went there once. Like I went back to the farm when I was maybe 14 or 15, but yeah, I don't know. I probably owe it to my father to know more about the farm than I do. At present.
I want to come back to this. I just want to say, like, because I was thinking, I guess I'll just tell you where my reasoning in my brain is going. Because, I mean, I ask about this stuff with every guest, but I have different thoughts on different people. I only know you through Severance. Like, I don't know anything else you've done, and I couldn't find a lot of information about you. So I grew a picture of you in my brain. And to me, okay, Severance to me, when I moved out to Los Angeles, my wife and I moved in 2017. I think it kind of dulled my ambition in some way because I stopped writing things that I started writing. Let me turn it the other way. I started writing things that I thought could get made. And then the person who I created in my mind, who I thought was going to buy this thing, was like some dumb executive somewhere. And in which case, which is weird because they run the gamut. There are many dumb ones, but there are also many smart ones. So it's not, but my mind conjured up the dumb one. I'm like, well, I got to make something. I don't know why I went to a Southern accent, but I got to make something for this person. And
for this city boy in his fancy chair
with his suspenders and his diet sodas. Yeah. So, and I got to write my first feature film last year, and it was my idea, and the director did not give me like notes that really pushed it away from that idea. And it was like kind of eye-opening after about 5 years of kind of just like dulling that ambition or dulling what I wanted to do. And I'm kind of curious. I've conjured this picture in my head of you as a very confident person to kind of like confidently. And obviously there's like a machine. I'm not trying to hide that part of it. And having like Ben Stiller in an Apple in your back pocket, I'm sure gives you that. But do you think that that picture is accurate at all, that you are a confident person? And if so, have you always been a confident person?
I really don't think of myself as a particularly confident person. I think that it's funny. There is a type of person. Often it's a type of guy who like you encounter a lot in this industry. And I have at various other jobs, like before Severance, where it's like, this guy is here because he can make really good eye contact and, you know, like speaks with this real sort of assured nature. And it's just funny because those oftentimes, and there's of course exceptions to every rule, but oftentimes when I meet that guy, it's like, this isn't the type of person who would have, this doesn't strike me as the type of person who fell in love with this organically, you know, and who, so I don't know. Now I'm making an overarching comment, about, you know, people, but all of that is to say that no, I am not good at sort of selling my stuff. I remember when I pitched this to Apple, I had like a really shaky voice. And I, at a certain point, had to just, I was like, okay, this is just how my voice is going to sound during this pitch. And that's going to be okay. But yeah, I wrote this thing as a sample, and I really did not expect it would ever get made. Like I did that same math that you're talking about in my head, where I was like, okay, who's the person I'm writing this for? What's the thing that I could write to sort of, you know, that ticks enough boxes, and doesn't tick the wrong boxes where it's like, this could actually get made. Yeah. And this one, you know, on the good advice of my manager, Ben Blake at the time, you know, he was just like, best thing you can do is just write something that is totally to your voice. And it's like, as a matter of practice, like that's going to be more, you probably won't get it made, but it's going to be more valuable as a sample if it's, you know, if it's something where, you know, you keep in mind, like whoever is reading these has been sitting there reading 25, 30, 100 scripts today, and they're probably not going to read very far into it. Mm-hmm. And it's just, you know, if you can show them something that wakes them up a little bit, you know, that's going to be to your benefit. So yeah, I wrote the original version of Severance, like, was even more strange and surreal. There was like, I've said this, and now I'm literally wondering if I said this to you or the previous interview person. I think it was her. I don't think it was you, but there was in the first version of the pilot, there was a pair of like disembodied legs that runs by. Mm-hmm. And, like the character, like Mark, like looks and thinks he sees something, but then and so like for that one, writing that one project, I really did I was like, okay, I'm not going to worry about making anything that anybody is going to do. I just want to do something that I would like to see and that I would find fun. And for me, that ended up working. And it worked because of a very specific set of, circumstances that I lucked into. But I do think overall that it's really good advice to not get in your head about trying to write something that is marketable, because that's what everybody's trying to do.
Yeah.
And everybody is sick of, reading something that is sort of safe and by the number. Like nobody
Ted
cares.
Lasso variation number 70.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, yeah. And there, granted, I hesitate to give anybody advice because there's like a weird confirmation bias that comes from having gotten something made. Like you look back and you're like, oh, clearly I did everything right. But, a lot of it is going to be just totally different and dependent on the individual and what happens to work and what you happen to luck into and where your skill set is. So it's different for everybody. But for me, it was like there was this little bubble of confidence that where I allowed myself to just write this how I wanted it. And then that everything sort of stemmed from that.
Okay, so if you aren't a confident person in general,
right?
What were you like when you were younger?
I was really quiet. I was a very shy kid, and like painfully shy when I was like, elementary, middle school. I got more into I think in high school when I got into theater, I sort of started to like find my station a little bit and find my footing. But yeah, I mean, I like didn't date at all in high school. I like barely dated in college. It was just, I was always a bit more of a quiet, contemplative kid who was scared of putting his foot in his mouth.
Okay. Well, that was the next question I was going to ask was, what was the reason for it? Did you have because that was a reason for a lot of my, I wasn't quiet, but I was definitely wary about treading into personal subjects with people because I was wary about putting my foot in my mouth, saying something that might hurt them inadvertently. And it's, I've talked about this on the show before, but there was this one time where I was at Temple with my parents. It's probably like a Friday night service. And I said something, I was like 8 or 9. And I had just learned the phrase, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Isn't that like Shakespeare or something, I think? And
yeah,
I said it. We were at, I don't know if you know Judaism very well, but like after services, there's something called the Oneg Shabbat where there's like food and punch. And I said to someone, I was with my mom and some other older woman at the temple, and I ate a cookie and I said, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And my mom later on scolded me in quotes. I don't remember exactly. She may have just said don't say stuff like that. She's going through chemotherapy.
Oh,
but I'm like, I was 8.
Oh, wow.
I've said this part in therapy. I was like, I was 8. How was I supposed to know that this person was going through chemotherapy? Even if I was older, how was I supposed to know? Unless there were like telltale signs, like, they were wearing a shmata on their head or whatever, right?
Right.
But that got in my head, and then I was worried. It took decades until I was able to broach personal subjects with people again. And I'm kind of curious about your own quietness.
I think it's similar, and that's fascinating, and it's, to me, it's fun to go back and think about why you remember certain things. And there's certain things that I think of from when I'm like 7 or 8, but I'm like, oh, I remember that, but it wasn't that big a deal. But it's like, no, if you remember it, it's a pretty big deal. Like there's a reason. And so I'm sure for you that experience was formative in a really, in probably a really painful way at that time. It's funny. I don't remember ever, as a young kid, I don't remember having an experience like that where I felt like I had like offended or caused pain or something to somebody. I think when I was younger, it was more just, I assumed everybody was smarter than me, or there were some meetings that I wasn't invited to where everyone agrees on how to act. It's like, okay, these are the things that are cool and we're going to talk about. And this is how you phrase those things. And I was like, how does everyone know these things? Like, know to do these things. So it was more like out of personal, possibly selfish embarrassment when I was younger. But then as I got older, and I felt like I did start to learn how to interact with people a little more. That's when I started to have worries like what you're talking about, which is like, and it's something now I think about all the time. I'm like, I'm going to say something thoughtless. There's going to be something that it just doesn't occur to me in the moment why it's terrible or hurtful. And I'm going to like cause somebody to feel small, and they're going to walk around sad the rest of the month, And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a through line maybe for people like us, is that you never quite shake, is just that meta thinking and constantly going back and revisiting something that you said and maybe even putting a worse context to it than was actually there.
For sure. Yeah. Sorry. I just had this reaction, in my body because the thing you said was, I remember when I was in grad school, I was very quiet around professors, even though I should have been, befriending them and talking to them as if we were peers or, closer. But I was worried that I would say something and they would be like, why is this dipshit here? Let's kick him out of the department. And that, Yeah. I just had that, like, I had my chest was on fire when you mentioned that. I was like, oh God. Oh yes. I recognize that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. And it's, it makes you feel better when you know that a lot of people experience that and that for the most part, they aren't bad, embarrassing people. They're perfectly fine people. So you probably are too.
Yeah. So what are the memories? It could be good or bad, or whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But what are those memories that from when you were younger that kind of have the neuron in your brain is bigger than the others? I know that's not actually how it works, but
no, I think it is. I think one neuron grows big. We had a neuroscientist work on the show. Actually, the guy that it puts the chip in Helly's head in the show is a real guy who we consulted with, and so he was like, I'll have to run that by him. But yeah, oh God, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of definitely embarrassing sort of moments. I don't know. I remember I was at a video store one time and my family was really excited because we were going to watch the movie Flight of the Phoenix with Jimmy Stewart. Mm-hmm. And I remember I went and I found it, and then I had to go to the bathroom. So I put it on another shelf and went to the bathroom, and then I couldn't find it again. And I don't know why. For whatever reason, I think I would have been 10 or so. But I just remember having this feeling like, oh God, I let my whole family down. I ruined the week. How could I not remember where I put it? It was sort of one of the first times of that weird little self-loathy voice really coming in and making itself known. And no, you're going to spiral about this, kid. This is not going to be something you get over right away. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think that some brains are just prone to stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Whatever the self-loathing module is in my brain is pretty pronounced. Well, thanks to therapy, maybe now it's shrunk a little bit, atrophied.
It's a little better. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that moment, it's so fun because that's Flight of the Phoenix, by the way, not that great a movie. Not that good. Pretty good. Not worth having an existential crisis over.
When you were younger, did your parents introduce you to good films? I had this weird thought a couple months ago where I'm the 90s were rife with indie film. And I always thought that like I started doing this stuff because of like comedy, because of like Kids in the Hall and Mr. Show.
Right.
And I really think that like it got in me earlier than that, watching like, I don't know why I rented Jim Jarmusch films from the video store, but I did when in the like early 90s.
That is weird.
It's very weird. I didn't understand them.
I mean, it's weird in a cool way, but
maybe
very unusual.
I
think so. I think that's like, yeah, I was watching Jim Jarmusch films as a kid. Like, that's cool. But it is. I can see at the time it seeming borderline disturbing.
Yeah. Well, it's just weird. Like, and I didn't understand them. I didn't know who any of these people were. Or like living in oblivion. I remember I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that as like a tween or something like that.
Wow. Yeah. See, for me, it wasn't, I mean, my parents were never like hardcore cinephiles. And neither, by extension was I. I think I found out who Jim Jarmusch was maybe a couple years ago. But yeah, like, my dad, I remember my dad being really into Monty Python and bringing home, Holy Grail at one point and watching with me, even though it was kind of, it was a little bit risque. And they would encourage me in other ways. Like my mom, I remember bought me, like I had to do a bunch of yard work, but then she bought me a camcorder so that I could, start making my little stop motion movies. And I remember my dad challenged me at one point to like a writing contest where we both had to write like a suspense story. And that was just, I mean, all of that was stuff. It's like, God bless him for having this little kid who couldn't play soccer at all and still trying to find a way to like engage me and get me interested in something and getting a sense that I had a skill that I was good at. So, I mean, I give them a lot of credit in that way. But yeah, it wasn't, they weren't, they weren't showing me Jodorowsky movies or anything like that. That wasn't, we were more of a Frank Capra household than Jodorowsky, which is also very good. And yeah, I mean, my parents they did have some cool taste. Like I remember like watching like Charade was always on when I was a kid, and that movie has such great dialogue and such like snappy, there was a lot of stuff that was in our house that I sort of grew from and learned from at that time.
I mean, when you were growing up, what kind of people were they like? Were they creative? What did they do for a living? Just throwing a lot at you. I guess just sketch me a picture of your parents as when you were a kid. Yeah. No, they were, my parents are utterly delightful people, and we're not, nobody in my immediate family was in, sort of, an entertainment or, anything field. Although my dad was in a play before I was born, and I found a picture of it and was so excited. I was like, you have to tell me everything about this play where you played a priest. But yeah, no, they were my dad. Was it Doubt?
I don't remember. It was Doubt. Yeah, no, it was like a community theater show in Olympia, and I don't remember what it was called. I think it was like a comedy of errors thing. Although, God, if my dad had been in Doubt. But yeah, no, there was, my dad was, the city attorney for the city of Olympia. So he like represented the city and would also like be there. Like every Tuesday he'd be on the like public access. They would show the city council meetings. And so I would could tune in and watch people yell at my dad basically. Ugh. And he, I mean, the poor man, took it like a champ and was always very respectful and very, tried to be helpful where he could. But yeah, so that was my dad. And then my mom, was a teacher. She stopped teaching when my brother and sister and I were born, but then went back to it when we were in, I think like high school-ish. So she taught second grade for most of her career, and also is a writer. This is a cool thing about my mom is she wrote, it was never published, but when I was probably 11 or 12, she wrote a sci-fi kids novel called The Adventures of Haley Hawkins, character named after my sister. And it was this like this girl who like time travels and goes and meets all these different women throughout history. And it was just this like really cool, fun, like feminist sci-fi comedy thing. And I had forgotten about it until just recently. Like I found an old copy of it. I was like, oh yeah, my mom wrote a sci-fi book when I was a kid. Like that's gotta have, you know, left a mark and been pretty, formative. So I gotta credit her in that way too.
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing that I look for a lot on the show is not necessarily like what are the things that you consciously kind of like sucked into your brain void, but like what are the things that maybe just like nudged you in a certain direction that maybe I don't know. These are all counterfactual, so who really knows? But that like maybe without them you might have not been pushed in that direction. Yeah.
I mean, I think that having my mom do that and like that was like a year or 2 years of her life that she was really working on that. And so that was a big inspiration. And the fact that it was never published and she was fine, like that was, I think, an important moment is like, yeah, it might not work out. And if that's true, you still have home to come back to, you know. I think that was a really, really important lesson for me growing up. And then again, like the fact that my dad is a lawyer and there was never once a sense of like, oh, this is what you're going to do, or you need to find a job that is reputable and more stable. Again, my dad challenged me to a writing contest. And I think that had there not been that support, I don't think any of this would have happened.
Well, then what was the pathway? So you got into theater. How did a self-proclaimed quiet kid get into theater? Because that would have like, I was in a band. Well, I mean, more into college. I kind of played music, but up until, I don't know when I would pound it. Like, I didn't want people looking at me. Maybe up until I was in a band. I don't know. Theater seems like I'm obviously projecting my own personality onto you, but like it seems incongruent, I guess, those two things.
Yeah, but you do see a lot of quiet kids get into theater. I mean, and music. I think there's a lot of that, and it's funny because it does seem counterintuitive, but I think for me it was like there was something about there being a structure within like. It's harder to be funny and interesting as yourself than it is to sort of, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to do this zip zap zop game and we're all going to look like idiots, but there's a structure to it. And there was a safety to trying to be funny in that space because that's what we're all here to be. We're all here to sort of be funny or engaging or you know, dramatic, whatever it is. So it was like, for me, I think it provided permission and it was a little less scary and less embarrassing because I knew I wanted to be funny. I knew I wanted to sort of be more outgoing and creative and I thought I could, but I was embarrassed to like do it as myself and sort of just step out and like make a joke as myself, you know? So I think it was it was like a back way into becoming a little bit more of the like gregarious person that I thought I could be and maybe wanted to be.
Do you mind if I ask, was that for me in those moments, it actually literally felt kind of like a force field that I couldn't push past. And I'm curious if there was a kind of physical feeling for you in those moments where I wanted, like I knew the person I kind of wanted to be, or it was like an amorphous feeling in my brain of who I wanted to be. But I could not push past like my own, I don't know, fear. I don't know what I want to assign to it, but some kind of like, there was something holding me back and it literally felt like a force field in those moments.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember when I was a kid, I thought Bill Murray was the coolest freaking guy in the whole world. I was like, God, if I could just like be that kind of effortlessly cool and funny and charming, like, and I remember having the thought, I was like, well, he must have done theater. Like, if he got into SNL and like he must have been a performer kid. So like I remember seeing a sort of a bridge. I was like, okay, maybe if I take this path, I can eventually become Bill Murray. And so I'm still working on that. But for me it was like, I don't know if it felt like a door you couldn't push past, but it was like I would just freeze up. Like I remember like if I was by myself in front of a mirror, I could have imagined conversations where I was, super cool. And then, but yeah, like you get in front of somebody and it's just like, oh God, what do I say? Like now I'm just standing here saying nothing. I seem weird. It's, it was just always like, it would be, those social skills would be there until suddenly they weren't.
Yeah. It's funny that for you, theater gave you some kind of context and understanding, because what I think we're somewhat similar, at least. And
I think so.
Why I liked improv was that it just let me adapt to whatever was going on. But my old writing partner said almost the exact same thing to me as you just said, where he's like, I like being on stage because I know what I'm supposed to do. And then when I'm off stage, I don't have any kind of direction.
I think that makes total sense. Like that's how I feel a lot of times when I'm doing improv or anything. Like even frankly, like conversations like this, sometimes it's like, at least we know what we're here to talk about. Like it's not just directionless. So
maybe, I would say the minute a sentence ends, there's the terror floods into my system of like,
oh God, what now?
There's now like half a second of silence. Please fill it.
Right. So just anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can like go to like very mannered questions that I know work, but I don't know. There is more. This is what I like about improv. about the ability to kind of just like, well, what did you just say? Let's see if there's something else underneath that we can play with.
Yeah. No, it's great. It makes for better conversation. I mean, I've been like that thing with my mom's sci-fi book. Like I've had that one in the chamber for a long time. Like I've wanted to talk about that for a while, but it's never come up. So it's, sometimes you zig instead of zag and you get to a good place.
Yeah. But okay, so you're doing theater in high school. It's giving you some kind of context in which you can, like the rules of the game in this. And then what leads you into, you eventually, did you go to Tisch for your master's? Is that true? Again, I just found this online. I don't know how true it is.
No, by the way, there's like 8 Dan Ericksons. Like there was a Dan Erickson who's an editor who people thought was me for a long time. It's like, oh, this guy edited like Blue Bloods or something, and now he writes. I did not edit Blue Bloods. I did. So I went to Loyola Marymount, which is down here in LA, for the first 2 years. And I was a film production major. So I was sure I wanted to direct. And then, actually directed a couple of short things and was like, hey, writing sounds cool. And so I ended up transferring back to Western Washington University, which is in Bellingham, Washington, and finished out my undergrad there. And then, 2010 to 2012, I was at Tisch for grad. So, I was there for 2 years.
Oh, so you were in New York when I was there. I lived in New York from 2008 till we moved out here, so 2017.
I didn't see you.
No. Which is weird. It's always weird when I'm like, oh, how do we not cross paths if we're both comedy people?
Yeah, no, I wasn't really a comedy person there. Like I would do some like performance stuff like when I was living in LA, but I went to a couple shows in New York, but that was it. Like I definitely wasn't as engaged in that world.
But like when you went to Loyola, what was the impetus, I guess? How did you know that you could like get into film? I didn't know I could do any of this. I had a whole detour. Like I said, I went to grad school for philosophy. I was a professor. I won't go into the whole thing because the listeners have heard it 1,000 times, but like my 20s were a detour away from kind of what I wanted to do. And I'm always
Right.
baffled. I'm baffled by people who have confidence, and I'm baffled by people who had the knowledge that, oh, well, you go to Harvard or you go to Tisch or something like that. I mean, not that it's easy, but like there's a pathway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. I will say, like, having said that, I'm not a very confident person. I have always weirdly believed that this was going to somehow work out. In a way that is kind of hard to explain, but it's like, cause obviously everybody thinks or, you know, either you think you can make it or you don't. A lot of people think they can make it. I don't know. To me, there was always like, maybe it's the fact that I just really couldn't envision myself doing anything else. Like I really did not, I was a terrible assistant. I was terrible in an office setting. I was really bad at Postmates, driving. I had like a awful rating. I don't know. But in this one way, I do feel like I had this, there was always this weird confidence that I couldn't really explain, where I'm just like, no, I think this is going to work. Like, I think this is actually going to work. And again, maybe I'm sure a lot of that has to be credited to my parents for being as supportive as they were and never making me feel sort of embarrassed for wanting it or for thinking that I could get there. But yeah, I don't know. I always sort of figured it was like, well, there's going to be all these steps and it's going to take a long time, but eventually I'll at least be able to like do this as a career somehow.
But like, was there anything that let you know that this is what you do to have this career? You know, did you have like a family member? Did you have like, was there a movie or a book you read or something that kind of clued you into it in the first place?
There was definitely, I read a biography of Walt Disney when I was in third grade. And I remember like that was it was like a little kid biography, but it still had some like industry details. Like I remember him talking about touring, you know, what is still the Walt Disney Animation Studio with his dad, and his dad pointing out like, oh, that looks like a hospital. And just like stuff like that, where I was like, oh, okay, so you buy a building, you buy a building, I guess. and that's where you, so I went out and bought a building at age 10. No, but that actually, I remember that stuck with me as like, okay, so there's like steps you can take to get from where I am to that. Mm-hmm. And then I had a great, professor in undergrad, a guy named Brian Willis, who was, my, you know, playwriting, teacher at Western. And just became a good friend and is a really great like mentor and very sort of active in the Northwest theater community. But he had gone to NYU. And so he was the one, he actually gave me like a recommendation and sort of was pushing me in that direction and was sort of walking me through the specifics of like, you know, like, yeah, this is a great, there's a lot of ways if you go through this program, like by the end, there's going to be like 2 or 3 viable paths that you can take and you can sort of decide what you want to do. Uh-huh. So yeah, that was another just very clarifying moment of like, no, it's not this scary amorphous thing that can't be done. It is scary, but there are paths, there are sort of checkpoints that you can move to and eventually make your way there.
Do you think you're a practical person in general, or were you practical when you were younger?
I think I'm pretty, not not naturally. And again, I think I may have had some undiagnosed ADHD something when I was a kid. I don't know. But, I definitely was never good at organization, or even like planning really. And, you know, I would always do my homework, but then forget it, you know, so I think that as I've gotten older, I've sort of tried to overcorrect by becoming more of a pragmatist. So I do like to, you know, I always, you know, even sometimes in the writer's room, I'll frustrate the other writers by being like, no, we need a plan. Like we need we need this and this and this all mapped out kind of perfectly. And, you know, the others might be like, well, we can figure it out. Like, we'll figure it out as we write it. And I'm like, no, writing's not fun.
So your outlines are like 50 pages long.
Yeah, I've gotten pretty into outlining, which is, again, it's funny because I don't think it's naturally how I am. I think like especially when I was younger, I was more I used to love to just like, I would improvise movies with my brother and sister, and like there was never a script, and we would always, you know, but I think that I've tried to, you know, as I got older, I tried to overcorrect a bit.
Yep. I get it. Yeah. No, when I was younger, I mean, again, that's why I like improv. I don't like if I'm like, you know, my wife before the pandemic, my wife and I did a monthly show together, and she's a stand-up. So she's incredible at like knowing jokes and being able to, and I had to like, I'm like, I have to know this punchline. Can't we just like fuck around on stage and we'll find something?
Yeah.
She was like, no, I have a punch. Like, I know what is funny about this. Just say the thing that I know. And I'm like, then I have to memorize it. And then I have to sit there and sweat. Well, am I going to say it the right way?
Right. Yeah, man. For season 2 of this show, I just want to go to a public place and just yell out like, can I get an object? Like everyday object in your pocket. Okay, good. You know.
Yeah. Adam, how do you feel about this object? How do you feel about this?
Yeah.
This stone shaped like a pen.
Yeah,
what is that?
Exactly. And then just have that inspire the whole season in a way that would be much easier.
We're right at the end, and there's, I guess, 2 questions still stuck in my head, and I wonder, well, I'll just ask them. Did you grow up in an emotionally open household?
Yes, I think so. We weren't a terribly demonstrative people, we Ericksons, I think. But I you know, my dad is from Minnesota. You know, there's a little bit of the like Viking stoicism, I think. But also, I don't know. I feel like my parents are, you know, from the 60s and 70s, and I think that they are very emotionally intelligent, and I think took measures to push through that stuff and be a little bit more open than maybe even their parents had been. So yeah, I think so. There was not a lot of like stuff we couldn't talk about. There wasn't a lot of like shame in the house, you know, where you're just, you know, if there was something up, my mom would ask me what was up, and we would talk about it.
Interesting. Were they hippies at all in the 60s?
A little bit. Yeah. There's like pictures of them in a van that they had. I don't know how they even acquired it. Maybe you just like took vans in the 60s. I don't know if you even had to buy them. But yeah, my dad had a big old bushy beard, and my mom had the really long hair. So they were kind of hippies.
Okay, then last question, because this is the thing that like when you talked about like when you started writing something and you're like, I'm just going to write what I want to write. And you talked about like there being like a surreal moment about like just legs walking past. I'm kind of curious, my brain is very surreal. Whatever's going on up here is like super surreal. And I'm curious if that's how your brain works. If you encountered surreal stuff, art, when you were younger, like what is going on up here, I guess is my question.
Yeah. I mean, I can't point to a lot of like specifically surrealist art that was like hanging in our home, but there was like, I mean, again, I think there's influences all over the place. And I was obsessed with the Far Side, and I was obsessed with, you know, Calvin and Hobbes and Monty Python and all these other, you know, mostly comedic things that had that a little bit of an anything goes sense. And I guess Far Side especially, it was just like that was just one panel of whatever it wanted to be in any given day. And so for me, it can be really freeing to like, if I'm trying to write something that's like technically good, or I'm like, okay, how do we feed this theme through these different restaurants episodes? I'm hungry. I would like some food, please. sometimes when you're going through it meticulously like that, it's great to just have a batshit crazy idea that comes in, or you're just like, okay, what's the most insane thing that could happen? And you just blow it up. And a lot of the great, a lot of my favorite stuff that I've ever done has come in that moment, where you stop trying to be good and you just start sort of, vomiting stuff from your brain onto the laptop. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that you gotta nurture that part of the creative process, because it can be the hardest part, and the scariest part, because it's like you don't have as much control over it, but no, that's where the good stuff is.
Yeah. Very little control. Dan, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. This is really fun.
Yeah, this is lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's been very nice chatting with you, and I hope I didn't say anything that my family doesn't like. I think it was all nice things.
Yeah, nothing pinged me. Again, I've been doing this show for 12 years, and there have been things where like someone's like,
we're not getting like a full expose on the Ericksons.
Yeah, like someone was like, yeah, my dad used to just keep like guns around the house unlocked when I was a kid, and then they like that pinged me, and then they wrote back like the next day. They're like, can you cut that part out? I think that's...
Can you cut the gun thing?
I think that's dangerous. Yeah. So yeah, nothing like went off in my head. No red flags went off in my head.
Cool. Good.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, man. This has been really fun.
Yeah, this was a delight. All right. Well, have a great... another interview? You have one more, right?
Yeah, we got one more.
All right. Well, have fun.
All right. Take care, man.
All right, see you. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye.